Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear friends. Welcome to this session of our Islam for Youth series. I hope you had a good week, and today we are back with a new topic. So, in our previous sessions, we have covered the sources of religion, sources of Islam, to be precise. So, we've covered a whole lot of issues regarding the Quran, and in the last session, we also discussed the Sunnah of the Prophet. And we also came to this conclusion that the source of religion itself is the person of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And from the Prophet, we received a religion in two forms. And one of them, of course, is the Quran, about which we studied its language, its history, its collection, its compilation, its time of revelation, etc. A host of other questions as well. And the second source of religion is the Sunnah. Now, the Sunnah is independent of the Quran. It is not dependent on the Quran. It is basically something which the Prophet Muhammad sanctioned, and it started off with Prophet Abraham's practices. These practices were either revived or given their true shape if they had dwindled in any way. And also, the Prophet Muhammad was responsible for instituting some new practices as well. So the practical aspect of religion was transmitted through the Sunnah, and the aspect which relates to faith and morality was transmitted to the Quran. And at the same time, we also got ourselves introduced to another genre which emanated from the Prophet, but exactly not in the way in which the Quran and the Sunnah emanated. The Quran and the Sunnah are both authentic in their nature. They were transferred in a manner which was authentic, and the Prophet himself took pains to have them transferred in a manner that they are rendered safe and secure. However, there was another category of things that we can best classify as conversations of the Prophet Muhammad. So he would converse with people, people would come to him, ask for his opinion, discuss personal issues with him, and he would give his own opinion. And when he could give an opinion, people thought, well, this is a whole treasure of things that he has spoken about. So out of their own urge, they started to transmit these conversations of the Prophet one by one person to another person, which was in contradistinction to the fact that the Quran and the Sunnah, the way they were transmitted was, it was a whole generation transmitting to the next generation and to the next, and so on and so forth. The Quran was transmitted primarily through verbal perpetual concurrence, which we call as tawatur, a large number of people transmitting it primarily through the oral medium. And the Sunnah was primarily transmitted through the practical adherence of the Sahaba in a very large number to a certain practice. And then that practice was transferred to the next generation, and so on and so forth. So we have generation to generation transfer taking place in the case of the Quran and the Sunnah. However, these conversations of the Prophet, when they were transferred, it was not the whole generation transmitting it. Neither did the Prophet ask them to transmit them. It was out of their own urge that they thought that this is something very worthwhile. It's a whole treasure, and they should do that. And so, a couple of people, when they heard something from the Prophet, they transferred it to the next couple of people, and so on and so forth. And we got these books like Bukhari of Imam Bukhari, which is called Al-Jami al-Sahih, the Muwatta of Imam Malik, Al-Jami al-Sahih of Imam Muslim, and a host of other books. And they started collecting these narrations which were transmitted by one or two people. And because of the fact that they were transmitted by one or two people, there was always a chance that there could be an error. And so a whole process of checking these conversations was instituted, and our scholars came up with historical tools of criticism on these conversations, and they sifted out the right from the wrong, because at times these conversations were not transferred in a way that they should have been, the way the Prophet actually spoke about them. And this is how we have actually covered this course so far. Today we are going to enter a new module, and that is that we will enter into the belief system. And that belief system, again, as we have been discussing, is not something which is discussed by the Quran for the first time. All Abrahamic religions affirm to this, and we'll start off by the Quranic introduction to God, that what exactly is the person of God, and we'll try to cover this introduction to God in hopefully in 2 episodes, today and the next week. So let's start off with the verses that I'm going to present before you today. And as I said, the purpose of these verses is to introduce to you the person of God Himself. Okay, so let me start off with the very first verse, or the first section of these verses. This is taken from the 7th surah of the Quran, which is called Surah Araf, verses 172 to 174. It mentions a very important incident, something that we don't remember, and something that took place before the Almighty created human beings. So it says, وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَىٰ شَهِدْنَا أَنْ تَقُولُوا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ إِنَّا كُنَّا عَنْ هَٰذَا غَافِلِينَ أَوْ تَقُولُوا إِنَّمَا أُشْرِكَ آبَاؤُنَا مِنْ قَبْلُ وَكُنَّا ذُرِّيَّةً مِنْ بَعْدِهِمْ أَفَتُهْلِكُنَا بِمَا فَعَلَ الْمُبْطِلُونَ وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ وَلَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. It says, and remember when your Lord brought forth from the loins of the progeny of Adam their children and made them testify against themselves, He said, am I not your Lord? They replied, we bear witness that we bear witness of that. Or it says that we bear witness that you are. This we did lest you should say on the day of judgment, we had no knowledge of that, or present the excuse our forefathers had already adopted idolatry, and we later became their children, as you will. So will you destroy us on account of what these false doers did? And thus we do explain our revelations, and so that you may return to the right path. So basically what it says is that before human beings were born, their souls were made to witness this conversation, and the Almighty said that, well, I am your Lord, and all of the souls, they said, yes, you are our Lord, and every one of us testified before we were born. Of course, this took place this conversation took place with our souls, and of course, we don't remember this incident, but the conversation that took place was that the Almighty said, am I not your Lord, which means that there is a God who exists, and all of us said yes. So the Almighty says that this will be presented against you as an excuse if you say that, well, I don't know if there is a God or not, or if you say, well, there are more than one God. So the fact is that on the day of judgment, neither can we deny something. Neither can we say that, well, God, we never knew you, because the Almighty says that this is something that I took a pledge from you before you were born. And also you cannot say that since you found your own forefathers indulging in idolatry, remember this is especially spoken of to the idolaters of Arabia, who were deeply incriminated with polytheism, and they are told that they just cannot present their polytheism as an excuse by saying that, well, we found our own forefathers worshipping more than one God, and so therefore this is something that is very natural to us. Okay, as I said, we will be discussing some of these passages, and then we will try to answer some of the important questions as well. So next, let's go on next to the next passage. This passage, of course, is something also it's very famous. It's called the Ayatul Kursi, the throne of the verse of the throne. And that is going to appear after this. This is actually another portion of the Quran. This is the 59th surah, Surah Hashr, verses 22 to 24, and basically this deals with the attributes of God, and you'll not find a more relevant place in the Quran where all the attributes of the Almighty are discussed in such abundance, in such a number. So it says, هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. So these are all the names of the Almighty, and these names are mentioned in the form of attributes. So the verse says, He is God, besides whom there is no other deity. There is no other person as God. He knows the unseen and the manifest. For example, what we cannot see, what is beyond us, He knows that, and what we can see, He also knows that. He is the most gracious, the ever merciful. He is God besides whom there is no other deity. He is the sovereign Lord, the Holy One, peace in entirety, the giver of peace, the guardian, the mighty one, the all-powerful, the most high. Exalted is God above whom they associate with Him. He is God, the architect, the originator, the modeler. All good names are His, and all that is in the heavens and the earth give glory to Him, and He is the mighty, the wise one. So as I said, this is a treasure trove of the attributes of God. You'll not find any other place in the Quran mentioning so many attributes of God at one place. And as inshallah, when you'll be rereading this passage, when we go through these comprehension questions, you'll realize that all these attributes have a special significance. They tell us how His attributes influence our lives, and how, as people who have been created by Him, are deeply affected when we realize these attributes of God. Okay, let's now move on to the third passage. This passage, of course, consists of a single verse. This is the famous verse of the throne, or the Ayatul Kursi. Again, this is a very good introduction to God. It says, Allahu la ilaha illahu al-hayyul qayyum. God, there is no God but He, the living, the sustainer. La ta'khuzuhu sinatun wa la nawm. Neither slumber nor sleep overtakes Him. Lahu ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. All that is in the heavens and the earth belong to Him. Man zal ladhi yashfa'u indahu illa bi'izni. Who can intercede with Him for someone except by His permission? يَعْلَمُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُمْ. He knows what lies before them and what is after them. وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. So it says that they cannot grasp any part of His knowledge except with His will. So without His will, they cannot grasp any part of His knowledge. And then the verse goes on to say, وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. His dominion prevails in the heavens and the earth. وَلَا يَؤُودُهُ حِفْظُهُمَا وَهُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمُ. And their protection does not vary Him in the slightest way. And He is the exalted and the glorious one. So these were the three passages that I just narrated before you. I recited them before you, and the translation as well. And they are basically meant to provide us with a basic introduction of God. Of course, these are the things that at times do bother us, but in a way that the Almighty has started this discussion when we go through the Quran, in a way that God is a self-evident reality, something that is so evident to all of us, and someone with whom all of us conversed before even we were born, that He should not become an alien person to us when we come into this world. And on the Day of Judgment, we will not require any proof of His existence except the fact that He is found in our own intuition, and we took this pledge from Him. And although we have forgotten that pledge, but just as we have forgotten the fact that we were born of a mother, we don't know our instance of birth from a mother, but all our atmosphere, our environment bears witness that a certain lady is our mother, even though we have not seen ourselves come out of it. So in a very similar way, although we don't remember taking that pledge with God, but the whole environment that we live in, the world that He has created outside us, and the world that He has created inside us, point to the fact that there is someone who has created us, and not only created us, but He's looking after us, He's taking care of us. He is the one who has these attributes that we have just spelled out earlier on, and He is the one who is going to be responsible for our upbringing. So, with these words, let us enter into a small discussion. Again, this is based on the question that I would like to pose to each one of you. So, my first question to you would be that what is the message of the first set of verses? So, remember what the first set of verses are. Let me just display them before you. This is Surah number 7, verses 172 to 174, in which that pledge is mentioned, the pledge that we took with the Almighty, our soul took with the Almighty before we were even born. So the first question is that what exactly is the message of the first verse? Yes, I can see a hand. Yeah, Zoya Nazir, go ahead.
Before their birth, all human beings were orientated by Allah being their Lord.
Okay, they were given this orientation. Are you talking about the orientation?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay, let us hear some of our other participants what they've got to say regarding this verse. What's the message of this verse? Okay, can I ask Basim Abid?
Um, I think the meaning of the first line is to say to remember uh like how you were created and like who you should be worshiping.
So, I mean, this is something that this verse or these set of verses actually does not even relate to our post-creation scenario. It tells us that something which happened before even we were given this physical form. And therefore, what does the message? I mean, you just heard Zoya say something that God gave us this orientation before we were even born. That He actually told us that there is someone who has created you, and you cannot present this excuse on the day of judgment that I don't have a creator because I have taken this pledge. You have witnessed me in a certain form, and I've heard you, and I've taken your pledge. So this is something which relates to before even this creation of human beings took place.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Mehru Muzaffar, would you like to share your opinion?
Well, I thought it was like you can't deny that God doesn't exist because we haven't met Him, because we have before we were born.
Right.
We just can't remember.
Okay, so that's pretty close. So you're saying that you cannot deny God by simply saying that we never have seen anyone creating us or there's no evidence of God because this verse says that basically when we were in our soul form, when we were not even created, remember what the words are that before the creation of mankind, this is how the Almighty went ahead. So yes, this is pretty much correct, Mehru. Thank you very much for that. Yes, Douglas, go ahead with your question.
I was going to answer your questions before, but I think everyone preceding me probably gave a pretty good answer already. But there was something that was bugging me about this. How could we be held accountable for the beliefs that we have in our lives if we are forcibly made to forget any oath that we make? I mean, it seems a tad bit unfair, don't you think? If we're given witness to God's existence before being born, then we're supposed to remember that during our lives to become Muslim, I guess, but we're made to forget it, and then He'll remind us of it after we're already dead and we've missed out on the chance to act on it. Like, how could He expect? I think, yeah. Like, it seems like saying I was ignorant to the existence of God is still a good excuse because He makes you ignorant of it as soon as you're born.
You see, the Quran answers this question at some of the other places. It says that the reason that this memory has been obliterated from us is that basically it's like a trial for us. And I just gave you this example that our environment, I mean, we have not seen ourselves coming out of our mothers. None of us have witnessed our birth, but it is the environment, our people who have seen them, or the other testimonies from around us which make us believe, and the way we are attracted to our mother, or the way we are attached to our mother, the way we feel that deficiency that makes ourselves so close to our mothers. I mean, there are certain other external stimuli which in spite of the fact that we have not seen ourselves coming out of our mothers, we still believe that a certain lady is our mother. So it's a very similar situation here, that although we have been made to forget Almighty, that we ever saw Him or took this pledge from Him, but at the same time, the fact that when we are reminded of this fact, just as when we are reminded of the fact, well, this lady is your mother, in a similar way, when we are reminded of the fact, well, there is a person who has created you, there is a being who has created you, and the star, the sun, the moon, your own body, the fact that everyone is looking after you, tells us that we have been created by someone. So the fact that this creation has taken place from someone, and of course this news has been given to us by the Quran itself, tells us that of course this cannot be false. So remember, the way we are discussing things here is from a standpoint of the view that we are already believing what the Quran tells us to be true, and at the same time, as I said, that our connection with God is there with us as a person who has already believed in God. So, I mean, there is always this question which can arise in a person who is yet to believe in God. But as I said, that would be a different debate for a person,
Right.
for example, who finds himself difficult to believe in God. For them, I mean, these are certain givens for people who believe in God, I would
Right.
say.
If I could just ask you a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I understand that arguing from the viewpoint of someone who doesn't believe in God isn't going to really go anywhere, and it would just derail the
Right.
class. So if I could ask a question from a Muslim perspective. So
Yeah,
if
sure.
God expects you to use the context clues around you to surmise His existence after He's made you forget about the oath in the first place, then what's the point of having the oath? Why do that?
Because of the fact that the oath itself tells us that there is someone who did create us, and we have not been born out of our own selves. And the fact that we are being tested with the fact that there is someone who has created us, and the fact that we should not demand that unless we see that process of creation, only then will we believe a person as God. So it's like telling us that if there is smoke, there's got to be fire. You don't need to ask that I'd like to go and see the fire myself, and then I'll believe there is a fire or not. The smoke is telling you that there is a fire there. So you see, what is happening here is that the Almighty wants to believe us through signs that lead to Him. And in spite of the fact that there are clear signs which lead to Him, and we are convinced about them, and we deny that, then that is how we would fail that test. So it's like saying that God would like to check whether we use our intellect in discovering Him. It's like a self-discovery, and in spite of that self-discovery, if we still, don't acknowledge Him, then the Almighty says that this is how I wanted you to pass the test, but because of your own attitude, you have simply not passed the test. So it's like discovering God through signs which He wanted, even though the fact that He could have revealed Himself, but of course, in that case, there would have been no test. Okay, thank you very much, Douglas, for your questions. And so let's move on to the next part of our part of our comprehension question. So, okay, so this is a small exercise I would like all of you to do, and that is make a list of God's attributes, which are mentioned in the second set of verses. So remember this second set of verses. This is one of the places in the Quran in which you'll find a whole variety of the names of God. And remember, the names of God are all His attributes. So could you just pick up your pen, maybe, or even write it on your phones or your computers, the attributes which are mentioned in this verse, so that we can have a small discussion, because you see, each of these attributes have a very direct influence on our lives and the way we spend them. And because of the fact that this is how we relate to God, our relation to God is to someone whom we already believe in as a person. So you can just see the English translation of these verses and see how it progresses from one to the other, and how these attributes of God are mentioned. Let's concentrate on the translation. I don't think it should be difficult at all. I mean, the attributes, they are self-explanatory, and they present an aspect of God's attributes in one way or the other. Okay, so Zoya Nazir, could you spell out the three names. Just pick up three names that you've written.
He is he is God, the architect, the organizer, the modeler.
Okay, so you picked up. I thought that you would be picking up right from the start.
Oh, okay. He knows the unseen and the manifest. He is the most gracious.
Okay, there is another attribute mentioned just before that in the first line.
Oh, he is the God beside whom there is no other dignity.
Yo, that's it. So, which means that he's just one God. I mean, this is what we call the belief of Tawheed. There is no other God than himself, which means that he is one and only. So his first most prominent attribute is that he is the one. Okay, so the next one is that he knows the unseen and the manifest. So that is this is an indication of the extent of his knowledge. So the first attribute is that there is no God but God, and the second attribute is that he knows what the seen is and what the unseen is. And this is with relation to ourselves. What we don't see, he sees, and what we see, he also sees. And the third you just pointed out is he's the most gracious. So the first three, you've just done that. So thank you for that, Zoya. Okay, so let's move on to Mehru.
He is the most great. He is ever merciful. And then it repeats. There is no other deity. The sovereign God.
So there's no other deity. That's already been actually discussed earlier on. So you can leave that. So ever merciful is one of the next one, and then which is the next?
The sovereign God, the sovereign Lord, and the Holy One.
Okay, thank you for that, Meru. Okay, who is next in line? Ryan.
Then the giver of peace, the guardian, the mighty one.
Okay, the giver of peace. So it says peace in entirety. Don't you think you've missed one?
Yeah.
Peace in entirety.
Yeah.
Giver of peace and the guardian. Okay, right. Okay. So we have who's next? Douglas, you're next.
My list wasn't in order. I'm sorry. I thought you just wanted us to list like the attributes of God from anywhere in general instead of just in the verse.
Okay. So
would you like me to say three that haven't been picked so far?
Yeah.
The wise, the originator, the designer.
Okay, that is fine. Okay, Kudrat, it's your turn.
So the mighty one, the all powerful, and the most happy.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Basim.
I have all good names are his. All that is in heaven and earth give glory to him, and he is the mighty.
Okay.
The wise one.
The wise one. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, next we have Mehreen Asad.
Architect and modeler. And the wise one.
Okay, but that's already been pointed out. I think you've. Don't you think you've left out some of them?
I thought all of them had been said by now.
Okay, almost all of them. Okay, thank you for that. Anyway, Mehreen. So, Alina Suhail.
Alina sent me her three because her mic isn't working, but they were from earlier. So she sent me the giver of peace, the guardian, and the mighty one.
Okay. And Douglas, your hand is still raised?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that actually did appear in that verse that hasn't been said yet is the sustainer. Is that one that we're missing?
Right, that is the one that was missing. Absolutely correct. Thank you for that. Okay, and then we have Ali Qureshi.
Oh, I accidentally raised my hand.
Okay, so it's pretty much all of you have pointed out to these names of the Almighty. So remember, as far as the being of the Almighty is concerned, as far of his, if you want to ask that what exactly uh, does he look like, or what exactly does he feel like, or how can we see him? So the Quran tells us that at one other place that la tudrikul absar, which means that our eyes are not able to see them in this world at least. Maybe in the next world we'll be given the power to see him, but our earthly eyes cannot catch his glimpse. So the only way that we can know God is through his attributes. And there's another way also that we're going to discuss in our next class, and that is his practices, the way he deals with his people. So his dealings with people, they are in the form of certain laws. So that is another way of having our introduction to God, but that is something that we're going to discuss inshallah next week. But as far as this particular verse is concerned, which is a very, very comprehensive introduction to God, just let me try to explain some of these attributes more and how they affect our lives. So he is the sovereign Lord, which means that there is no one who shares his sovereignty, and of course there is no question that you can ask other people to grant your wishes, because he is the only one who is going to grant your wishes. He is the Holy One, which means that he is free from all blemishes. He is the perfect one. And since he is free from all blemishes, he is the perfect one, we need to relate to him because we ourselves are imperfect. As human beings, we need some perfection, but we cannot find that perfection in ourselves. We can find that perfection in God. So the way to relate ourselves to God is that all imperfections that we find ourselves in, we negate them, and we find that there is someone who is without those imperfections, whom we can trust, who we can fully rely upon. And then it says that he is peace in entirety, which the Arabic words are salam, which means that he is someone who would like people to remain peaceful, who is someone who would like to create this peace amongst people. And for that particular aspect, the next attribute is also very instrumental. It says that not only is peace in entirety, he is the giver of peace. So, like a person who gives you mental peace, a person who gives you peace and stability in the society that you live in if you follow proper norms and proper regulations. So he's not just a person who is himself peace and you can rely on him as such, but he himself is a person that if you have a proper comprehension of God, you'll find your mind at peace as well. And then he's the guardian. He looks after you. He takes care of you. He is the mighty one. As there's no one who can conquer him or who can overpower him. And therefore, all our conceptions of power and might, they have their manifestation in his form. And of course, he's the all-powerful, the most high, the exalted, which means that he is free of all blemishes. Shortcomings or imperfections are things that we humans have, and therefore we find ourselves to be his creation because of the fact that we have these imperfections. And then it says that exalted is God above whom they associate with him. So you remember this verse is being also addressed to the foremost people who existed in Arabia when the Quran was being revealed, and they were the idolaters, the idol worshippers, and they are being told that he is far above what you associate with him, because they used to associate other idols with him, and the Quran tells us that he is exalted, he is beyond, he does not need a partner. He is the sole one, he is the solitary one who has created. And then he says that another attribute is that he is God the architect. I mean, he makes the plan and then he originates it, he gives it execution, and then he is the modeler as well, that whatever he creates, he brings that creation to perfection. And I think we don't need to think much to realize how beautifully and how perfectly he has created whatever he has created. Just look at our own selves. Look at the system around us, the stars that shine, the sun that sets and rises at times with second precision, with such a precision that we cannot even imagine, and the systems of our own body. So a person who designs, who executes, and who perfects. And finally, it says that all good names are His, which means that, of course, you think of any good attribute and you'll find it in Him. And then again, the verse that all that is in the heavens and the earth give glory to Him, which means that they ascribe that He is the exalted one. They ascribe to Him attributes which are all positive, which speak of Him as a being who is faultless. And then this is repeated once again that He is wise and the mighty one. Again, the fact that He is wise would mean that He has created this world with a purpose. He has created mankind with a purpose. He is not someone who does something without any purpose. Everything that He does has a purpose behind it. And the purpose of creating mankind is that by giving man and human beings the freedom to choose whatever they would like to do, He gives them this choice. And then it's like this choice is like a test. And once this period of test is over, He actually appraises and assesses the choices that we made, because He is trying to choose people, select people for heaven, for paradise, for a higher form, maybe, in which He would like some other assignment that is waiting for us, which is present there. But for that He needs people, He needs souls which have purified themselves, and they are going to enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so thank you very much for answering this question. Okay, my third question is a very simple question, and that is in the third passage that you just read. It said that neither slumber nor sleep overtakes Him, which means, of course, that there's nothing of the sort of sleep or the fact that He is unattentive in any way. He's always watching. So what exactly is the need to tell us this? I mean, why would God want to tell us that He does not feel sleepy? Any clue to that? Why would God want to tell us that He never sleeps? Ali Qureshi, go ahead.
Because what is it? He's always like supervising or like watching everything.
Okay, and Douglas?
Well, if one might suppose that God ever slept, then you could call into question whether His reward would be eternal, because if He's sleeping, could heaven even still be there? And you might also call into question whether He's truly all-knowing, because if He's sleeping, He might miss something. So I guess He would have to specify that He's never sleeps, so that you could believe in like eternal paradise and His omniscience.
Right. So the basic message being that if you just reflect on our own lives, if we know that there is someone who is watching us, there's a policeman maybe, or a magistrate, or a sergeant who's there on the roads, who's looking after us, or there is a system of surveillance which checks our overspeeding, etc. And so we are all on our toes. But if we know that there is maybe 5 minutes in those 24 hours in which that surveillance system is no longer in force, and it's our nature, then when we think that there is no one watching us, we do all kinds of things that we are not very proud of. So you see, God had to specify that if He says that I am always present, because had we been given this information that there is a time, 5 minutes or maybe 2 minutes, in which God is not watching over us, of course this would also be telling on His own knowledge, as Douglas, you just said. But at the same time, it will actually tell us that there are those 2 minutes in which we can just make hay, do anything, and break the laws, or do anything we would like, and that would not come into the notice of God, because He would be sleeping at that time. So He had to reveal this fact. Well, yes, I am ever present. I am ever present, and there is not a single moment when that system of surveillance, so to speak, is not there. Zoya, you have something to say?
Yes, on question 3.
Yeah.
It is to show that He is always there. This also connects with the living and the sustainer.
Absolutely correct, Zoya. That's wonderfully put, that He's living, that He's watching over us. There's not a time that He's not attentive to us. And so we should not think that there is going to be ever a moment in which His knowledge would be imperfect because of the fact that He's gone to sleep. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the last question. Again, this is a fairly simple question that you can see, and this relates to the third passage. And the third passage is right here in front of you. It says that make a list of the attributes of God. Just let me read it again. Mention the attributes of God which are mentioned in the third passage and how they can influence our lives. Now, this is important. So, what are these attributes and how do they influence our lives? So, you have the screen before you. You have the verse number 3, the third set of verses, which is, of course, the verse of the throne, the famous verse. It's 255 of the second surah, which is Surah Baqarah. So you have to make a list of these attributes and also explain that how they can influence our lives. So let's start discussing the verse. So we have once again Mehru. So could you explain what you have written?
Well, I said I have 2 points. One is that, as you said, he's always like watching and he's always there. So it influences everyone to do good so that they get into heaven, since they know that they can't do anything bad because he'll always be watching. And then the second one is like how like all that is in the heavens and earth belongs to him. Like he has the heavens and the earth, and like everyone like there will see like protection. So it influences like Muslims and everyone to do good, so they sustain their protection in heaven, where they'll be with God.
And how do you suppose that these attributes that you just pointed out, how do they influence our lives?
They make us do more good.
Okay, so they because of the fact that he is watching, that should inspire us that because we are being looked upon by someone, we should not do bad things. And what do you suppose is the influence when we say that that all that is in the heavens and the earth belong to him? What sense does that convey to us?
Like the plants and the animals, they're all his, so we have to take care of them.
Okay, you have to take care of them, and they are given in our trust. And there are no other deities besides God who own them. You see, one of the reasons in the times of the revelation of the Quran was that they used to have separate gods for separate things. And they would have a god of heaven, a god of earth, a god of land, a god of sea, etc., etc. So it says that everything is in his ownership, and there's not the fact that they're owned by someone else. He has created all of them, and he owns them. So if this is the case that he creates everything and everything belongs to him, then what is the purpose of having different gods for different elements of nature? So thank you for that, Mehru. Okay, let's hear from someone else, and that is Zoya. I'll come back to you. Alina, Suhail.
So Alina sent me her answer, and she was also talking about him not sleeping or slumbering, and she took a different take and mentioned that this also influences us to always look towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help, and that he's always there.
Okay, so because of the fact that he's always watching over us, he's always taking care of us, so at all times we can depend on him and we can call upon him. Thank you for that, Alina. And Zoya, your turn.
He knows what lies before them and what is after them, and without his will, they cannot grasp any part of his knowledge.
Right. So what does that affect us? How does that affect us? His knowledge and the fact that what is in the past or what is in the future.
Okay. We know who to listen to, who to please to, and who to be answerable to.
Sort of in an indirect way, but you see, the more important thing is that if he knows what is in the past and if he knows what's going to happen in the future, it means that nothing can be hidden from him. So if he calls us to account, if he takes an account from us, if he says that, well, you did this thing and you did that thing, so he knows what we did in the past, he knows what we're doing now. So it's like saying that he knows everything. And you just cannot increase his knowledge. You just cannot go there and say, well, I did this thing and that thing. It would be already in his knowledge. So it's like an all-encompassing form of knowledge. And thank you for that, Zoya. Okay, just let me explain some of these attributes a little more for all of you so that perhaps you can think more about them as we end this session. So, as you can see, that what is being said here is that uh, first of all, it is said that he is the living and the sustainer. He lives himself and he brings other people into being as well. So, now you know what does this imply? It says that we have friends, we have colleagues, we have so many good people around us whom we can fall back on, whose support we can count upon. But there is one shortcoming, and that is that they don't live forever. We could have a friend who dies. We could have a parent who no longer remains in this earth. He's called by God. So, if there is a support who is eternal, who is always there for us, it is God. So one of the most important influences that it has on our lives is that He is our biggest friend. He is someone who we can always relate to. He is always there. He is closer to us than our life vein, as the Quran says at another instance. So this is a huge assurance for all of us that we are not alone. And there are so many things that we cannot share with our closest of friends. And as I said, our closest of friends, they are not eternal, they can pass away. But with God, we can share each and everything. And He is always there. When other people pass away, when other people go away, He's still with us. So that is a huge assurance for us. It gives us a satisfaction that someone is there waiting for us. And then the other important thing which these verses convey, or this verse conveys, is that we just cannot simply add to the knowledge of God. So it says that He knows what lies before them and He knows what is after them. And without His will, they cannot grasp any part of His knowledge. So whatever knowledge we have regarding this universe is something that has been divulged to us, which has been given to us by God Himself, or of some of the other things that we see ourselves accomplishing. So it says that we are not going to add to the knowledge of God. And then the most important thing is that His dominion prevails in the heavens and the earth. So His dominion, His kingdom is always everywhere. And as I said, that this verse has that special ring about it because of the fact that it was revealed to people who had indulged or were indulging in idol worshipping. They would have separate gods for heavens, they would have separate gods for earth, and they would have separate gods for the wind, the sea, the moon, etc. In fact, they would worship the moon at times and the sun as well. So it says that it's the dominion of God which prevails over the heavens and the earth, which in other words means that the whole universe, every single bit of this known universe, or even which is unknown to us, is actually governed by Him. And He is not the slightest vary in any way. What does that mean? Of course, this has been another reason why people have invented other gods or demigods or semi-gods, as you can see, because they always thought that it would be very difficult for one single person to sustain and to govern this whole expanse. And for this, they invented some other forms of God who they thought would be are ones who are actually supporting the bigger God or helping him out carrying out his chores. So God has told us categorically, especially these idol worshippers, that He doesn't need anyone, and He is fully capable of protecting the heavens and the earth. And that does not make Him tired, and He does not become overburdened when He looks after them. He is the exalted and the glorious one. So, dear friends, we come to an end to this lesson, which was primarily an introduction to the attributes of God. As I just said, that it's difficult. I mean, it's not only difficult, I would say, it's impossible to see God in this world. And the only way that we can have awareness about God is through His attributes. And we studied His attributes today. Inshallah, in our next class, we'll be studying His practices, which again are a means of introduction. So we have a hand raised, and we'll end our session in answering your question. Omar?
Okay, so my question was, if God is all-knowing, then why would He make us take this test? He would have already known the outcome, right?
Absolutely correct. So yes, this is a very, very pertinent question that you have asked. You see, God already knows what lies in the future. He would be knowing who has passed the test. He would already be knowing who has failed the test. But you see, and of course, this would entail that he could have, sent certain people to heaven and certain other people to hell on the basis of his own knowledge that, well, he knows what is going to happen. But you see, people who would be punished could have easily asked him that why are they being punished when they have not been even given a chance? And this could be, of course, have resulted in an argument or people not being satisfied with the fact that why are they being consigned to hell. So what God did is that he created mankind so that they prove themselves worthy of a place like paradise and also prove themselves unworthy of a place like paradise and enter hell. So when they enter hell, they will themselves testify, yes, we deserve this place because we did this and this and this as wrong deeds. Otherwise, as I said, had God just relied upon his knowledge, it would have been very easy for people to argue with him and ask him that, how do you know that we are worthy of hell? So, but making them pass to this world or to this test, it's like telling them, well, this is how I justify sending you to hell or heaven, because what you've earned is not because of my knowledge. Of course, I knew what's going to happen, but because you did what you did out of your own free choice.
Yeah, but I have another question now.
Okay.
He wouldn't need to create the test in the first place then, because he knew if he created the test, then it would have this outcome.
Right. So if you ask me that why is it the fact that he even created mankind and what was the purpose of this test? So we have this indication that he wants to select certain individuals for heaven, for which I do have this inkling, I would say, that he has some higher purpose assigned for them. Of course, he's going to reward them profusely, but maybe he is selecting people for a particular mission or maybe a particular cause, people who pass this test, people who purify themselves, people who are pure from inside. So this could be that he has a certain purpose already there for them, but not for everyone, only people who have purified themselves, that they're going to undertake a certain mission that at the moment we don't know of. Okay, Omar, thank you. Yes, Douglas, go ahead.
I had a question originally, and now I'd also like to ask a question piggybacking off of Omar's. So firstly, in terms of all these attributes of God, when I've argued with Christian theologians and Jewish theologians before this, they would normally just summarize it as three: is that he's all powerful, omnipotent, omniscient, and perfectly good. So why does Islam have so many of these other traits? They seem very much redundant with one another. Like
you see, as I said, that there are certain details or certain shades which are added by these attributes, and although he's all-knowing, he's omnipotent, he's omniscient, and he's all good, but you see, there are, I would say, categories which branch off from these, which give us further insight into God. So when we elaborate on a certain premise or a certain principle, and we include certain other things, so it's like making a certain distinction, which gives us more depth of a particular greater attribute, below which some other attributes are subsumed. So it's like having some more depth. It's like, you see, it's like trying to quench our thirst for God. All of us would like to know more and more about God. It's like simply like knowing more and more about our father or our son or our grandfather or someone who is our ancestor. So just as we would be very inquisitive to find out more about them, so if we have that inclination or that inner feeling that there's someone who has created us and we cannot see that person, you see, the biggest thing is that we just cannot witness. So we'd like more and more to know how he behaves, how he comes about doing certain things with people, and what are his attributes. And so that is, I think, the reason.
Oh, and then to ask my second question, sort of following Omar's. So if the point of the trial is to serve as evidence for us, the humans, because God doesn't need the trial in the first place, he already knows how it's going to happen. And if the problem with not having the trial is that the people he would send to hell would say, hey, you don't have good evidence to send us here. Then why didn't he just make everyone good enough to go to heaven? Or why didn't he just make everyone perfect in the first place?
Well, to be honest, that is a question that we would need to ask him whenever we meet him. So what has happened?
So there's no explanation in the Quran for that? Or?
Well, I mean, see, what we know is that he did create us for a purpose, and the question that perhaps you are asking is that why at all did he need to create us? I mean, he could just have been there. So for that, we don't have a very, to my own knowledge, the Quran has chosen to be silent, and there is one place which it says that there are certain things that at the moment would be premature to be revealed to you. And there are a lot of things. It's like giving this example that when we are small, let's say when we are toddlers or 5 or 6 years of age, there are so many things that we don't realize unless we grow up and become adults. And only then we keep on understanding certain things. It does seem that there are certain things that perhaps in our human capacity would have been difficult to convey to us, and which we would get to know more when we face him in the hereafter. But as far as the question itself is concerned, that why at all or what at all induced him to create us, I don't think we have a very, to be honest, I think we have any answer to that.
Okay, thank you. I guess it couldn't have been anything he would need us for, because he could do anything
of course,
himself. So.
It couldn't have been any of his needs. It has to be, maybe it could have done something towards the fact that he is an immensely creative being. He creates things. The Quran at one place says that at every instance he's doing something. There's something emanating from him. So it could be his power of creativity. He would like to do something which he has, his own abilities to manifest himself. But again, I would say this is my conjecture. I cannot say that this is correct. It's absolutely correct or not.
Right. I guess it's just speculative at this point.
More speculation. Okay. Okay, my friends, thank you very much for being with us in this class. It was wonderful to have you here. Inshallah, as I said, in the next class, also in the next session, we'll be talking more about the Quranic introduction to God. So thank you very much. It was very enjoyable for me to listen to you. Inshallah, we'll be back next week, and have a good week. Khuda Hafiz.